The Battle of Ban Me Thuot was a decisive battle of the Vietnam War which led to the complete destruction of South Vietnam's Second Corps Tactical Zone. The battle was part of a larger North Vietnamese military operation known as Campaign 275 to capture the Tay Nguyen region, known in the West as the Vietnamese Central Highlands. In March 1975, the Vietnam People's Army 4th Corps staged a large-scale offensive, known as Campaign 275, with the aim of capturing the Central Highlands from the Army of the Republic of Vietnam in order to kick-start the first stage of the 1975 Spring Offensive. Within 10 days, the North Vietnamese destroyed most South Vietnamese military formations in 2nd Corps Tactical Zone, exposing the severe weaknesses of the South Vietnamese Army. For South Vietnam, the defeat at Ban Me Thuot and the disastrous evacuation from the Central Highlands came about as a result of two major mistakes. Firstly, in the days leading up to the assault on Ban Me Thuot, ARVN Major General Pham Van Phu repeatedly ignored intelligence which showed the presence of several North Vietnamese combat divisions around the district. Secondly, President Nguyen Van Chia's strategy to withdraw from the Central Highlands was poorly planned and implemented. In the end, it was the ordinary South Vietnamese soldiers and their families who paid the ultimate price, as North Vietnamese artillery decimated the South Vietnamese military convoy on Route 7. Background: at the beginning of 1975, members of the North Vietnamese Political Bureau paid close attention to the military situation in South Vietnam to plan for their next major offensive. On January 8, 2 days after the Vietnam People's Army 4th Corps had captured Phoc Long on the northern edges of South Vietnam's 3rd Corps Tactical Zone, North Vietnamese leaders agreed to launch an all-out military offensive in order to end the war. Originally, the North Vietnamese leaders expected the campaign would last 2 years, be completed in 1976, and pave the way for final victory. Their key objectives were to bring military pressure closer to Saigon, annihilate as many South Vietnamese military units as possible, and create favorable conditions on the battlefield so that combat forces could be deployed from their current localities. Following extensive discussions on the fighting ability of the Army of the Republic of Vietnam, the Political Bureau approved the General Staff's plan, which had selected the Central Highlands as the main battlefield for the upcoming offensive. The Central Highlands campaign was codenamed Campaign 275, and the goal was to capture the city of Ban Me Thuot. To achieve that objective, North Vietnamese General Van Tien Dung placed great emphasis on the principles of massed force, secrecy, and surprise to draw South Vietnamese forces away from the main objective. For the element of surprise to be successful, North Vietnamese forces needed to launch strong diversionary attacks on Pleiku and Con Tum, thereby leaving Ban Me Thuot completely exposed. Once the element of surprise had been achieved, the North Vietnamese would mass their forces on Ban Me Thuot, and prevent South Vietnamese reinforcements from retaking the city. Order of battle: North Vietnam. In March 1975, the Vietnam People's Army Central Highlands Front, under the command of General Ban Me Thuot, were given the responsibility of carrying out Campaign 275 to capture key objectives in the Central Highlands. Major General Vu Lang was the deputy commander. Colonel Dang Vu Hiep was appointed the front's political commissar, and Colonel Phi Tri U Ham was the deputy political commissar. The Central Highlands Front fielded 5 infantry divisions and 4 independent regiments. To support the aforementioned units, North Vietnam deployed the 273rd Armored Regiment, 2 artillery units, 3 air defense units, 2 combat engineer units, and the 29th Communications Regiment. Offensive strategy: between February 17 and February 19, 1975, North Vietnamese field commanders in the Central Highlands Front held a conference to plan for their upcoming offensive. In order to plan their combat strategy, North Vietnamese commanders assessed the potential obstacles faced by the Vietnam People's Army and the strength of the Army of the Republic of Vietnam in the Central Highlands. Following extensive discussions, North Vietnamese commanders concluded that the South Vietnamese Army in the Central Highlands could mobilize about 5 to 7 regiment-sized units to counter the upcoming offensive. In the worst-case scenario, if South Vietnamese units were not tied up elsewhere, North Vietnamese commanders thought that South Vietnam could probably mobilize between 9 to 12 regiments. North Vietnamese commanders believed South Vietnam could deploy about 1 or 2 armored brigades, 3 to 5 battalions of artillery, and 80 aircraft per day to support the army. The North Vietnamese commanders within the Central Highlands Front discussed the possibility of the United States re-entering the conflict, which they believed would see the commitment of about 100 fighter bombers from the United States 7th Fleet. Aside from dealing with the army formations which South Vietnam might have deployed, the question of where and when to strike was the main problem that concerned the North Vietnamese. After the strength of both armies had been taken into account, the Central Highlands High Command came up with 2 offensive options. In the first option, the North Vietnamese could avoid the outlying South Vietnamese installations and strike directly at their primary target of Ban Me Thuot. For the first option to be successful, the North Vietnamese had to secure highways 14, 19, and 21 to isolate Ban Me Thuot and stop potential South Vietnamese reinforcements. The North Vietnamese favored the first option because it would give the ARVN 23rd Infantry Division and other support units little or no time to respond. At the same time, the first option would have enabled a quick victory without inflicting large-scale damage on the civilian population of Ban Me Thuot. In the second option, the North Vietnamese had to destroy all the outlying South Vietnamese defenses and then move on to Ban Me Thuot. The Central Highlands Front, under General Hoang Minh Thieu's command, ordered all combat units to follow the second option and destroy the defenses around Ban Me Thuot, but to be ready to switch to the first option when the opportunity presented itself. South Vietnam. The responsibility for the defense of Ban Me Thuot, located in South Vietnam's Second Corps Zone, was given to Major General Pham Van Phu. The 23rd Division was the main unit defending Ban Me Thuot and the surrounding areas. Major General Pham Van Phu had at his disposal 5 artillery battalions equipped with 146 artillery guns, and 1 armored brigade of about 117 tanks and armored vehicles. The South Vietnamese military also stationed Air Force and naval units in Ban Me Thuot. They maintained 12 Air Force squadrons of about 102 fighter bombers, 164 helicopters, and 69 transport aircraft, and the Navy deployed 2 squadrons on the coast and 2 squadrons on the rivers. The Army of the Republic of Vietnam also had the 22nd Division, 7 Ranger battalions, 36 Regional Force battalions, 8 artillery battalions equipped with 230 artillery guns, and 4 armored brigades in the Central Highlands. To support those ground units, the South Vietnamese Air Force had 32 fighter bombers, 86 helicopters, and 32 transport and reconnaissance aircraft. The ARVN 23rd Infantry Division and other support units were placed under the command of Brigadier General Tran Van Cam. Across the Central Highlands of Vietnam, the South Vietnamese military enjoyed a numerical superiority of about 78,300 soldiers against North Vietnam's 65,141 soldiers. However, within the vicinity of Ban Me Thuot, the South Vietnamese were actually outnumbered by a ratio of 5 to 1. The North Vietnamese had more tanks, armored vehicles, and heavy artillery, with a ratio of about 2 to 1. North Vietnamese General Van Tien Dung believed his tank and artillery units in the Central Highlands were the key factors that guaranteed a quick victory. because South Vietnam simply lacked the capability to withstand such large numbers of heavy weaponry. South Vietnamese preparations. On February 18, 1975, President Nguyen Van Thieu gathered all his commanders at the Independence Palace to discuss the Lai Tong Kiet military plan, which was approved by the National Security Council in December 1974. During a briefing by ARVN Colonel Hoang Ngoc Lung, head of the ARVN General Staff, several important issues were brought to the attention of President Nguyen Van Thieu and the ARVN Corps commanders. Firstly, information gathered by the South Vietnamese Army showed there were 7 North Vietnamese divisions in the northern areas of South Vietnam's 1st Corps tactical zone. Secondly, there were signs which suggested that the North Vietnamese might launch a large-scale attack during the spring-summer season of 1975. And thirdly, the 2nd Corps Tactical Zone under the command of Major General Pham Van Phu was most likely North Vietnam's first target. On February 19, General Phu returned to Pleiku to draw up a defense plan. During the next few days, reports from South Vietnamese intelligence showed that North Vietnam's 968th Infantry Division had arrived in South Vietnam's 2nd Corps from Laos. 2 divisions had taken up positions around Pleiku and Kon Tum, while 2 regiments had set up their base in Quang Duc. On March 2, a CIA officer flew out from Nha Trang to inform ARVN Colonel Nguyen Trong Luat of North Vietnamese preparations to attack Ban Me Thuot, without offering information on the strength of North Vietnamese formations. In response to the CIA report, General Phu ordered the 53rd Regiment to move from Quang Duc to Ban Me Thuot, and the 45th Regiment from Tuan Man to Than and Don Tham. General Phu did not make any further changes to the South Vietnamese order of battle in or around Ban Me Thuot. Thus, by the time the North Vietnamese opened fire on Ban Me Thuot, General Phu had simply failed to implement an effective plan to save 2nd Corps. Prelude. Diversions. In February 1975, during the midst of Tet New Year celebrations, a North Vietnamese deserter surrendered himself to the ARVN 2nd Brigade headquarters. Through extensive interrogations, the North Vietnamese soldier revealed the whereabouts of North Vietnamese units. The 10th Infantry Division had encircled Duc Lap, while the 320th Infantry Division had arrived in Each Leo and were gearing up for an assault on Tuan Man, and an unknown unit was heading towards Ban Me Thuot. In late February, North Vietnamese artillery shells began to rain down on Pleiku, which convinced General Phu that the North Vietnamese would attack Pleiku instead of Ban Me Thuot. South Vietnamese military intelligence and information received from the American Embassy in Saigon showed the presence of about 2 or 3 North Vietnamese combat divisions positioned about 20 kilometers away from Kon Tum and Pleiku. Indeed, the movements around Pleiku and Kon Tum during the month of February were designed by the North Vietnamese Tay Nguyen Front to fool South Vietnamese military commanders in the Central Highlands. Since December 1974, the North Vietnamese prepared for the offensive by conducting raids on various South Vietnamese outposts and broadcasting fake radio messages to keep South Vietnamese commanders guessing about the location of their next assault, while the South Vietnamese units were kept occupied by communist diversions. North Vietnamese General Hoang Minh Thao began moving his troops into attacking positions. The VPA 7th Combat Engineer Regiment was tasked with connecting Route 14 at North Vo Dinh with Highway 19 near Mang Yang Pass, which surpassed the district of Kon Tum. The VPA 10th Infantry Division began withdrawing from Duc Lap, and only left a small force behind to continue the bombardment of Pleiku. As artillery and tanks units took positions north of Kon Tum, The 320A Infantry Division deployed a small unit west of Pleiku to apply additional pressure on South Vietnamese positions at La Sun, Than Anh, and Don Tam. The 198th Special Forces Regiment raided South Vietnamese depots at Pleiku, while the main formation of the 10th and 320A Infantry Divisions marched on Ban Me Thuot. Personnel from local Viet Cong units infiltrated Com Tam and Pleiku to spread rumors of a big communist offensive on the aforementioned districts. In response to the rumors, the ARVN 45th Infantry Regiment was sent out to sweep the areas near Ban Me Thuot, Tuan Man, and Duc Lap. To maintain the secrecy of their operations, the North Vietnamese Thanh Nguyen Front ordered the 320A Infantry Division, which had by then set up camp west of Ban Me Thuot, to avoid contact with the South Vietnamese. Upon their arrival from Laos, the 316th Infantry Division received similar orders, and was not allowed to open fire under any circumstances. As the events in South Vietnam's Second Corps Tactical Zone were beginning to unfold, intelligence reports from Saigon continued to warn General Phu of an imminent communist onslaught on Ban Me Thuot. Despite the numerous warnings which he had received from the CIA and his own military intelligence, General Phu remained convinced that Pleiku would be North Vietnam's next target. As a result, on February 18, 1975, he ordered the 23rd Infantry Division to remain at their positions in Com Tam and Pleiku, thereby reversing his earlier decision to bolster South Vietnamese defenses at Ban Me Thuot. Closing in on March 3, 1975, North Vietnam's Campaign 275 against South Vietnamese military forces in the Central Highlands began. The 95A Regiment was the first unit to go into action when they destroyed one South Vietnamese Regional Force Battalion and successfully secured a 20-kilometer stretch of road on Highway 19 connecting Ai An with Plai Ban and Phu Yen. Later, elements of the North Vietnamese 3rd Gold Star Division secured a section of Highway 19 at Tong An that connected with Bridge No. 13 at Dong An, Khe, killing about 300 South Vietnamese soldiers. On the night of March 5, the North Vietnamese 25th Regiment ambushed a South Vietnamese transportation convoy at Kai Kuk and cut off Highway 21 west of Ban Me Thuot. To keep all the main roads open, Phu sent reinforcements to defend a section of Highway 19 at the eastern side of Pleiku and ordered the ARVN 45th Infantry Regiment to march back from Tuan Man to defend Route 14 at southern Pleiku. The ARVN 53rd Infantry Regiment, under the command of Colonel Vu The Quang, was redeployed from Quang Duc Province to defend Ban Me Thuot. By March 8, the North Vietnamese Army had completely isolated the South Vietnamese Second Corps Tactical Zone from the rest of the country. Route 7, which had not been used for a long time due to neglect, was the only road still open. On March 5, Quang sent one of his battalions to Ban Me Thuot in a convoy of 14 vehicles. They were ambushed by the North Vietnamese 9th Regiment, 320A Infantry Division at Tuan Man. 8 vehicles were destroyed, while 2 150mm artillery guns were captured by the North Vietnamese. The remaining 7 vehicles had to turn back, and Quang returned to Ban Me Thuot on a helicopter. On March 7, the North Vietnamese 48th Regiment, 320A Infantry Division, captured Chu Shay and Tuan Man, and took 121 soldiers prisoner. On March 9, Phu ordered the 21st Ranger Battalion to fly out from Pleiku to support the 53rd Infantry Regiment in their efforts to retake Tuan Man. During the early hours of March 9, as the 21st Ranger Battalion and the 53rd Infantry Regiment were repeatedly beaten back in their attempts to retake Tuan Man, The understrength North Vietnamese 10th Regiment captured Duc Lap and the surrounding areas. At 11 a.m. on March 9, Phu flew out to Ban Me Thuot to assess the military situation with Brigadier General Le Trung Tuong, Colonel Vu The Quang, and Colonel Nguyen Trong Luat. Phu admitted that the situation at Duc Lap was irreversible. The 21st Ranger Battalion was reassigned to the north of Ban Me Thuot. The 2nd Battalion of the 53rd Infantry Regiment was to defend Dak Sak, and when the opportunity arose they would be tasked with retaking Duc Lap. Subsequently, Quang was entrusted with the task of defending Ban Me Thuot. Despite the strong presence of two North Vietnamese divisions outside Ban Me Thuot, Phu believed the situation outside the district was only a mere diversion attempt, and the real target would be Pleiku. Thus, upon arrival at his Pleiku headquarters, he raised the level of alertness there to 100%. While Phu was waiting for the enemy to assault Pleiku, the North Vietnamese 7th and 575th Combat Engineer Regiments cleared the main roads into Ban Me Thuot to ensure tanks and heavy artillery could be directed at the district without hindrance. By the early hours of March 10, the North Vietnamese army was in a strong position to strike at Ban Me Thuot.